Hey, Bird, I see you're somewhere new and exciting today.
Well, Aubrey, I thought I'd give you a quick call as I am somewhere pretty special.
Hang on, Michael. Is that the Disney logo behind you?
You got it in one. I am currently at Disney's StudioLAB to kick off the first episode of a mini-series marking HPE's 10th birthday.
Being a huge Disney fan, I am so jealous. And what an amazing place to be. Shall we do our intro?
Sounds good. I'm Michael Bird.
I'm Aubrey Lovell, and welcome to Technology Now from HPE. Welcome to the history of HPE and 10 Objects, a 4-part mini-series to celebrate our 10th birthday as a company.
That's right. Over the next 4 weeks, we are going to be looking back at how we got to where we are today, from our origin story selling oscillators, that thing over there, out of a garage in Palo Alto, to our modern day innovations and the future of technology.
Now, each week we are going to be looking at a different aspect of the company: innovation, compute, networking, and new frontiers. And this is episode 1, Innovation.
In our first episode, we return to where it all began, a little company you might have heard of called Disney.
Now, normally at this point in the show, I would be taking a dive into the history surrounding our topic of the week, but this is a special episode, so I'm going to leave it up to our guest to tell us how we got to where we are today. So, Michael, who are we talking to this week?
So, as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, I visited the Walt Disney Studios StudioLAB in Burbank, California, where I spoke with Alice Taylor, who is the director of StudioLAB, about the relationship between our companies and how our 85-year collaboration has impacted innovation and storytelling. Alice, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Alice, we will get into what StudioLAB is in just a moment, but to set the scene a little bit, our companies have been working together for 85 years at this point. So can you tell us a bit about the relationship between the Walt Disney Company and HPE, like maybe a bit of a whistle-stop tour?
I mean, the story really goes back all the way to the founding of Hewlett-Packard. A relatively young Mr. Disney needed specialist equipment for his new movie, and he sourced it from 2 guys working out of a garage in Palo Alto. So over the years, Disney continued to make movies, and at the same time, the world has slowly digitized. This affected both animated films and live action too. And back in 1982, we released a movie called Tron, which was the first movie to use a computer to control all the processes during the shoot: camera adjustments, superimposed graphics, that kind of thing. And for that, we used the HP 9826. As the world of animation moved on and we moved from hand-drawn to animating on computers, we moved to HP workstations as they could handle the graphic-intensive nature of the work. And then more recently, we've transitioned to high-performance artist VDI. So that's virtual desktop infrastructure. And this kind of came in around late 2019. It actually meant that we were in a really good place to respond in the least disruptive way for our staff when remote work became the norm.
Wow. So I guess our stories are really quite linked together, aren't they?
Yeah, there's a whole history there.
And currently where we're sat right now is inside something called StudioLAB. So could you tell me a little bit more about that? And I guess, like, what do you do here?
Yeah. So, this is the StudioLAB. Our official line is that we are the advanced development division for innovation in creative technologies. And what that boils down to is basically we're here to find new ways of storytelling using emerging technology.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Now, obviously, technology is what we're all about here on Technology Now, of course. So can you tell me a bit about the sorts of technologies which we are working on together?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think one of the most interesting ones is the virtual desktop infrastructure that we just mentioned.
Okay, could you just give us a quick rundown of what that is?
Yeah, I mean, I hope it's relatively self-explanatory, but VDI is basically a virtual desktop hosted on a server rather than your personal computer. So that means that if you have access to that server, then you can access your virtual desktop from anywhere. This means that you could, in theory, use any device to access your desktop, whether you're in the office or at home or anywhere else.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So why was VDI so useful at Disney StudioLAB?
Well, the way it came about is back in 2019, we hosted an innovation summit here at StudioLAB for the studios, which was themed around VDI, which was emerging at the time. So we invited everyone from all of the different Disney studios to participate and share information about what they deemed important at the time. And the artist VDI we were discussing differed from the way VDI was regularly deployed. Artist VDI needed to be low latency and demanded a much more powerful graphic processing. So the virtual nature of this approach allowed us to relocate artist workstations out of physical offices at the studios and into a data center, which not only led to a quieter office back at HQ, but more importantly, enabled that flexible and remote working. Artists could log on from home, could do their work around, potential family commitments. And then hosting workstations in a data center also meant that, instead of having to buy a load of hardware, which may or may not be utilized 100%, we could buy an amount of compute instead, shared across the artist as and when they needed it. So that's a much more efficient way to run. It was totally a win-win for the studios. The artists had a better experience and the studios were spending their money more efficiently. So the third big win, I mentioned 2019, so maybe you see where this is going, but it was something we couldn't necessarily have predicted. But using VDI meant that we were in an awesome place to respond rapidly and effectively when that pandemic hit.
And that's because you already had the infrastructure in place for remote working.
Yeah, exactly. Hit the nail on the head. Everything went remote with COVID, as you know, but we'd already been looking at it because virtualizing the system, we needed to accelerate our plans anyway. And then in the pandemic, it just meant that we could just move fast instead of having to come up with something brand new and a new response. Obviously, people would have had to have decent infrastructure at home to connect to VDI, but because their workstations were virtual, it did mean that they could access them from wherever they were. If artists were living somewhere with a stay-at-home order, they could continue to do their jobs, without any issues.
Wow, that's super fortunate that you had the foresight, and I suppose a lot of it comes down to paying attention to where the world is going and wanting to be at the forefront of the technological curve, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The studios were paying attention, right? But part of what we do here at the lab is to keep track of the direction that tech is going in. And we're constantly looking for ways to utilize those emerging tech as they come out and then help our studios so that storytelling does not stop.
Storytelling is what you're all about here at Disney.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's roll back in time for a few moments. We've talked about what we're working on together today, but when we first worked together, everything was a little bit more analog. So let's take a look at how we got here.
Sounds good.
And I'm assuming that this device sitting between us has something to do with the origin story, because if I'm not mistaken, it looks quite a lot like an HP oscillator.
And that's because this is an HP oscillator. It's actually the 200B, and this little beast is the beginning of our collective origin story. So Disney had, as I mentioned earlier, produced their third feature-length film at the time. It was an animated interpretation of 8 famous pieces of classical music. You may know where I'm going with this, called Fantasia. And the cinemas at the time were not able to show the film in the way that Disney wanted them to. Their sound systems simply weren't good enough. And so Disney had created a whole new system for the film called Fantasound, and that's where this oscillator came in.
Because before Disney came along, Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard had created what they called the 200A oscillator, where the light bulb here was used as part of the circuit, which helped stabilize everything so it worked properly. You could possibly call this their light bulb moment.
Thank you for that terrible joke, but yes, you could.
Well, Alice, I am a dad, so I have a reputation to uphold when it comes to dad jokes. But anyway, as far as I know, Bill Hewlett had taken his 200A oscillator to a meeting of the Institute of Radio Engineers in Portland, Oregon.
Yep.
which was where Disney first discovered it, right?
Yep. Exactly. So that meeting, there happened to be an engineer from Disney who realized that this oscillator, or similar, was exactly what they needed for Fantasound. So our executive clearly agreed at the time, because what happened was Disney went back to Mr. Hewlett and Mr. Packard and said, hey, could you modify the 200A and into the 200B, this custom for Disney? And that's what we see before you right here. And they did. And so Disney then purchased 8 of these for the whopping price of $71.50 each.
So it really just happened to be luck that this Disney engineer was at this meeting when Bill was showing off his new invention.
I mean, it was an audio meeting, fortuitous serendipity, maybe. Like, I'd hope that there were audio engineers there. But yeah, I mean, serendipity and luck.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. So the years go by until the next big disruption in the world of movie making, CGI, computer-generated images.
Yep, that's right. Before CGI came along, people used a variety of techniques for practical effects. They would make, scale models and film them, or use like forced perspective to change the apparent size of characters on screen. Here at Disney, we use techniques like rotoscoping, still do, which is tracing over a live action camera frame to make motion appear more natural, and innovative techniques with glass and light to create ripple effects like we did in Pinocchio, for instance.
Yeah, it's really amazing to think how people had to work before we had computers to help animators with creating images for us. So let's focus in on that transition, because this is where workstations come in, right?
Yeah, it is.
So, okay, so I guess before we get into why it was so important, can you just quickly explain what workstations are?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, workstations are basically a computer that's particularly good at performing graphic-intensive processes. And that's exactly what you need if you're going to be making a giant digital animated movie. So these workstations would be used in conjunction with render farms to actually produce the movie itself.
And I'm assuming a render farm is pretty much what it says on the tin.
What it says on the tin. Just think of it like a large number of servers which are all working together to do giant batch jobs. So you can make your animation during the workstation during the day, and then in the evening you send it off to the render farm to transform it into the actual scene.
Okay, I think I got it. So what is it about workstations which makes them so vital for production at Disney?
Well, at the end of the day, workstations played a huge role in our success during the transition from traditional to digital content creation. So it's about more than the output. Obviously, the quality of the final product is crucial. But before you can get there, you have to think about the artists too. Workstations could handle the work they needed to do, but on top of that, they provided an excellent artist experience. So at one point, they were the de facto standard across all of the different studios, which isn't an easy feat to achieve.
I know they say self-praise is no praise, but that is a pretty impressive feat. Now, we talked about VDI before, so where does this fit into the whole picture?
So VDI is, think of it like potentially the next step in that progression. So we started with workstations and render farms, and then the workstations went virtual, VDI. So we do still have render farms, but there is evidence that we may be able to roll everything into one centralized compute, which helps ensure our resources are being used correctly and that we're getting the most out of it. So on top of that, as I mentioned before, VDI allows our artists to work from anywhere and any device, and they aren't being restricted to office-based. So if they have to work from home for whatever reason, and this happens a lot, they're able to do so. And this allows us and our artists to have way more flexibility when it comes to our work and the ever-evolving industry.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And of course, like we've seen a lot of changes in recent years. I assume you're finding new and innovative ways to utilize emerging technologies to help your teams with what they do.
Yeah, we're exploring loads of practical use cases. We're working closely with the software engineering team at Hewlett Packard Labs, for instance, to build software for a project we have called the Dead Pixel project.
And what exactly is that?
Well, when you have pixels on screen, if there's an issue with one of them, then it's not lighting up. I mean, you have to look closely, but it's a dead pixel, and it'll look like a tiny black dot on your screen, right? Sometimes this is a hardware issue with the TV screen or the screen you're looking at, which there's nothing we can do about that if the hardware is broken. But if the problem is software-based, then that is absolutely something that we have to handle at our end. Sometimes the movie can have the problem baked into the actual digital print, if you like, and you end up with render errors at that point. And that would very much be a problem that we would have to solve here at our end at Disney. So Dead Pixel Project is a way of finding those render errors or artifacts. We use machine learning to help spot them so that they can be fixed. So rather than our QC, our quality control folks, having to go through the film frame by frame and quadrant by quadrant, the machine learning can help them in their day job there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's faster and I can imagine more accurate, right? Like these advances are quite exciting, really.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And it doesn't just stop at the Dead Pixel project. We have an amazing innovation partnership with HPE. We've been able to procure the latest and greatest in emerging technologies to provide to our studio teams. So this best-in-breed tech from HPE via this partnership, it unlocks new capabilities that our teams wouldn't have been able to necessarily have access to, enabling like new use cases in research and development for our studio banners. So that's our 7 film studios, stage and music.
Well, in that case, I'm looking forward to seeing what we collaborate on next even more. Alice, thank you so much for joining us on Technology Now, and thank you so much for hosting us here at Disney StudioLAB.
Thanks for coming.
I cannot believe you got to go to Disney to record an episode. So cool.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it? And I think that it's such a good opener to this series too. Not only is the subject fascinating, but it really links us into upcoming episodes too.
Go on.
Well, the big one I can think of is actually the Dead Pixel project, because it's using a form of computer vision to check if there are issues and artifacts in the movie renders, which is a very similar idea to one of the things that the Spaceborne computer does, which we will be discussing in episode 4. The AI is doing a very similar job in completely different situations.
It's amazing the connections you start to notice, right? I mean, I think for me, one of the most amazing parts of the story has got to be the VDI. Like the fact that Disney StudioLAB had their finger on the pulse of innovation enough to have already started to explore VDI just before they needed it is amazing. And I think it really shows just how much they care about staying as cutting edge as possible.
Absolutely, Aubrey. Obviously, I've mentioned my family before on this podcast, but I think the importance of having that infrastructure which allowed their teams to work from home, which improved their work-life balance.
Oh, for sure. And we all know that happy workers produce better content, right? But I think the movement from hand drawing to digital workstations and VDI also speaks to how digitization has given us more freedom too. Like the digital era has allowed us all more flexibility and agency when it comes to our time. And this has benefited companies like Disney and HPE tremendously. And obviously, we've been involved with various digital revolutions over the years, but our workstations were part of the original digital revolution in animation too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's another example of how far technology has come, right? Back in the day, we had these specialist pieces of kit for preparing animations, which would need to be sent off somewhere else to render them. And now we can do basically low-level animation on our own computers.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the high-end animation still needs that specialist equipment, but the fact that, people can do this at home for fun really shows that democratization of technology too. And to think this relationship started from an oscillator in a garage. I mean, it's pretty bonkers when you think about it.
Yeah, it really is. So you've set me up quite nicely for our final thought in today's episode, but I do have a bit of a confession to make, Aubrey.
Okay.
This story starts with Fantasia and the 200B oscillator, but I've never actually seen Fantasia myself.
Michael, no, you must stop and watch immediately. It's a classic.
I know. But I thought it would be nice to find out everyone else's favourite sections. Producer Harry was a huge fan of the dancing mushrooms. He claims there's a video of him when he was 5 or 6 dancing along with them at home. And executive producer Izzy said she just remembers being very, very stressed when the mops just kept coming at Mickey in his section. But what about you, Aubrey?
Well, it's been a long time since I've seen it, but my main memory was all of the magic in the stories, right? And I also believe that Alicia, who's been providing production support on this show since it started, was a huge fan of the little Cupids and the centaurs. How cute.
Well, I thought it would be nice to ask Alice the same question and see what her thoughts are about it.
My favorite part, Fantasia.
Yes.
All right. Well, I mean, the obvious answer is the Sorcerer's Apprentice scene, because it's a classic and it introduced the idea of Sorcerer Mickey and the Sorcerer's hat, which is emblematic of Disney these days. And there's a giant Sorcerer's hat outside of Disney Animation, and there's one in Downtown Disney, and many more. But actually, my secret personal favorite is A Night at Bald Mountain, which is the introduction of Chernabog, the bad guy. And the music is classic. It's that real like bad guy moment, sends chills up your arm. I love it to pieces.
Okay, well, that brings us to the end of Technology Now for this week. Make sure to come back next week for our second installment of the history of HPE and 10 objects, where we will be talking about compute. And again, thank you to our guest, Alice Taylor. And of course, to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please do let us know. Rate and review us wherever you listen to episodes. And if you want to get in contact with us, send an email to technologynow@hpe.com. And don't forget to subscribe so you can listen first every week. Technology Now is hosted by Aubrey Lovell and myself, Michael Bird. And this episode was produced by Harry Lampert, Izzy Clark and Spencer Trinwith, with production support from Alicia Kempson-Taylor, Becky Bird, Alyssa Mitri, Emily Nakayama, James Irvine, Todd Soley, Sean Marchetti, Rahil Ali Mohammed and Renee Edwards. Our video editor was Mikey Nissenbaum, and as always, our theme music was composed by Greg Hooper.
Our social editorial team is Rebecca Wissinger, Judy Ann Goldman, and Jacqueline Green, and our social media designers are Alejandra Garcia and Ambar Maldonado.
Technology Now is a Fresh Air production for Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, and we'll see you at the same time, the same place next week.
Cheers.